Now, you've been listening for months now to the debate over whether Kansas City should change the design of KCI Airport from 3 terminals to a more efficient and modern 1-terminal design. Well, what's been the experience in other cities that have splashed out lots of money on new airport makeovers? This week, the Kansas City Star examined that issue. And in every comparable city they looked at, from Sacramento to Indianapolis to Raleigh-Durham, passenger traffic is down, and so are aircraft departures, and not just a little bit, but on average, as you can see, by more than 20%. Now, I'm sure you got a lot of people who are unhappy about the idea of changing the airport, delighted with you because of that story, Lynn Horsley, that you wrote this week.
Well, that's true. I will say that that's not the only reason to think about building a new airport terminal. Obviously, you want to sustain or build your airport, your traffic, your passengers, your airlines. The entire industry has been contracting for several years. So it's difficult to know whether these other new terminals had lower passenger traffic because of the recession or because of the airline industry. You know, it's going to be a difficult decision for Kansas City because our airport is old. There are other reasons to think about building a new terminal. But if we're thinking that we're going to dramatically increase passengers, the number of direct destinations, even international flights, it's not a guarantee.
But did this take the wind out of the sails, Dave Helling, of some of the backers of this idea because they saw some of these numbers this week?
Well, the boat's going to be on the lake for a long time, so no one story will put wind or take wind out of anybody's sails. It's going to be with us for months, perhaps years. In fact, you could make a case, Nick, frankly, that the reduced numbers that Lynn talked about in her story might be an excuse for consolidating the airport, that indeed, in an era when flights are shrinking, why do you need 3 terminals? Maybe you only need 1 terminal. So there are lots of ways to look at the data. The data will be massaged going forward. We're many months away from a final decision on this.
But it's true, though, Mary. I mean, we have been in a recession. Airlines have been consolidating. It would be unfair to point the finger completely at the fact that these other airports, these other cities, have been spending an awful lot of money, sometimes over $1 billion on improving their airports, and and pointing the finger at the fact that they've got fewer flights today.
Absolutely, but people aren't always fair in these sort of arguments. I mean, people, you know, they have their position on this. Personally, I think we should change the airport, rebuild, partly because of this. To me, Lynn's story just solidified my opinion on it. There are reasons that we need to keep up with the times and change, and one of them is how the industry itself has been affected and changing. I think, part of it, though, is thinking ahead. What can we build? How can we shape Kansas City's airport to somehow look ahead? To me, that would be the more significant conversations that we need to be having.
Sam?
Yeah, I think what Lynn's story pointed out, and I agree with Mary now that I think a new airport should be built. And part of it is the flexibility that she talked about, that now if you build a new airport, that gates don't necessarily have to be assigned to one airline or another. They can float back and forth. Plus the fact you've got a terminal sitting out there completely empty. Who knows what it costs just to have it empty? You still have to have utilities on. There still has to be a modicum of security around it. So if it's going to make it more efficient, even if it doesn't bring in more business, I think it's a good thing.
What you have to keep an eye on, though, is that if you do have a shrinking number of flights, and therefore a shrinking number of passengers, the financing for the airport improvement becomes very problematic very quickly. Has to be paid for by passengers, parking, airline fees, rentals, that type of thing. If you have fewer flights, fewer flyers, trying to pay off $1.2 billion plus interest over 20, 30 years, whatever, becomes very difficult. That's the other subtext to Lynn's story.
Well, I was going to say the mayor this week named a citizens commission, which is a way of having more people weigh in on this topic, and so it doesn't seem like it's just the city council trying to shove this idea down the city's throat. They will be having months of meetings. There's also a new group this week that said they're going to start gathering petitions. They want to put an item on the city ballot that would require a city vote for us to move forward with any new terminal.
And one of the key people on this new task force that the mayor has put together is one of the members of the Save KCI group, one of the biggest detractors of a one-terminal design.
Exactly. There are people on both sides of this issue. There are people who are firmly in support of a new terminal. There are people who are firmly against it. They will have it out on this citizens group, and hopefully they'll reach a consensus, although I don't know.
So doesn't that prove then that the mayor doesn't have his mind made up, that the city doesn't have its mind made up on this thing?
We'd have to know there are 24 members, I think, on the
Okay.
task force. You'd
So
have
just
to
having one
identify all
person-
of them.
okay.
Just one token person against the
No.
airport is
And some of
probably
that's
doesn't tell
being-
us everything.
Yeah, I think some of that's just good politics. You know, you let people have a voice, have a say, and you never know. I mean, someone may come up with a really brilliant idea out of that task force. It could happen.
All right.